from here in the Bay Area, California. Good afternoon or good evening if you're joining from anywhere else. My name is Satya Thal. I'm a senior advisor at Americans for Responsible Innovation, which is hosting this press conference. I'm also a senior fellow at the Foundation for American Innovation. And for the purposes of this event, having worked in Congress and the White House for a number of years around tech and AI issues, we're particularly pleased to have this group of state legislators, leaders in their various states and legislatures on issues around technology and specifically concerns as well as optimism around AI. And the focus here today is around a proposed 10-year moratorium in Congress's reconciliation package, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that could potentially arrest all the experimentation, the the laboratory experiments, the policy tailoring that's going on in the states uh, as uh, as we try to get our hands around what do we want AI technology to look like as we adopt it, as it gets metabolized into our economy, into our daily lives. Um, we'll kick it off for brief introductions, but the focus here will be taking questions from the audience for legislators, all of them who are active in this space. I'll just say up top for my part, just putting my cards on the table. I'm speaking for me, not for ARI necessarily. I'm optimistic about the potential for AI. And I take a backseat to no one about believing that we are, in fact, in a global race, that there are important national security implications. And I want America, I want the United States to maintain its leadership and ultimately win the global AI race. That said, I think what we're talking about, if we take away from the kind of the formalistic legalese, is I'm actually in favor of preemption in a lot of cases. There are things that are interstate commerce and they should have, but we're not talking really about a preemption. We're talking about a prohibition. Um, in everyday language, when we talk about preemption, you know, if breaking news happens, we say we preempt this program to take you live on the scene. It's because we're replacing it with something. And I think what we're talking about in this proposal, such as it is not replacing uh, what the states are doing and trying to figure out what works for them for their constituencies with a uniform national framework. We're saying replacing it with nothing. And to me, that's not preemption. That's a prohibition. I think we've seen in a related area, people may differ on online privacy, about obligations that social media have to, say, children, to are most vulnerable online. We have widespread agreement that there should be a federal framework, but Congress has thus far failed to be able to accomplish that. I'd also note ARI was very supportive of the Take It Down Act, which is a bill that was recently signed by President Trump. But that was an effort that actually, in some ways, had its origins in the states and had state legislators who were raising the issue of deepfake pornography, non-consensual imagery, and exploitive material. Glad to see it have been taken up by Congress, but that was actually something that state policymakers were ringing the alarm bell on a while back. The last thing I'll say is I have some friends in the policymaking space, as well as folks in Congress, members of Congress who like to point at, well, we have thousands of AI bills in state legislatures, and we can't possibly lead on innovation with 1,000 different requirements across 50 states. But the number of bills that are introduced is not an indicator of actually what's happening. And anyone in Congress knows that because less than 1% of bills introduced in Congress will ever get passed. It may be a leading indicator of interest. It is not, in fact, what we're going to see. We're not going to see 1,000 AI bills passed by the states. Any one of these legislators can tell you it's a long road from introducing an idea to getting adopted and in a bicameral system and get it signed by the governor, right? So I just want to put that out there because I see that as kind of a shorthand for why we can't allow states to operate on their own. So quickly, I'll pause there. I'm looking at my screen. Ask our state legislator, our guests, to just briefly introduce themselves, their states, and kind of their key area in AI that they're working on. We'll start with Representative Doug Fiafia.
Hey everyone, Representative Doug Fiafia from the state of Utah. I have been in the state legislature just one short year. My background is in technology. I recently left Google after 5 years, and this has been a topic of interest for me. And so grateful to be here.
Senator Barry Usher.
Thank you. I'm Senator Barry Usher from Montana. I'm a Majority Whip. I'm also the current Vice President of National Conference of State Legislatures, and I'm on the Cyber and AI Task Force with NCSL.
Senator Louis Blessing.
Thank you, Senator Louis Blessing, Ohio. I'm the Ways and Means Chair, which deals with tax policy, and I'm a licensed professional engineer by trade in electrical engineering. So I write software for a living, and I do have, some degree of nexus with AI. But there's two pieces of legislation that I'm currently carrying that deal with this. One is Senate Bill 79 that deals with AI price fixing. And the other one is Senate Bill 163 that deals with simulated obscene material and identity fraud, through the use of AI. So hopeful that I can get those across the finish line, but it's been a few years that I've been working on this.
Thanks. Senator Heidi Baldry.
Hi, I am Senator Baldry. I am from Utah, and my district in particular is the fastest growing tech corridor along the Wasatch Front. You may have heard of Silicon Slopes in California. I grew up in the Bay Area. Well, we've got one here in the state of Utah, and that's my district. We are the fastest growing district, not only in the state, but in the nation. And this would directly impact the economics of my area. We're talking, notable companies, Qualtrics, Adobe, Domo, Lucid, Pluralsight, Divi, Entrada, Podium, Degreed, Weave, et cetera, et cetera. And so this particularly impacts my area economically.
Thanks. Representative Brandon Guffey.
Yes, Representative Brandon Guffey from South Carolina. I am chair of the AI Regulation Committee in South Carolina, as well as my primary profession is working for a child-safe device company as well. So,
Senator Bo Watson.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson. I'm a co-chairman of the Health Innovations Task Force, which is part of NCSL. I've also been part of the Technology Council here in the state of Tennessee, where we've done a lot around technology. We recently created our Artificial Intelligence AI Council to begin the process of creating legislation, rules, and regulations. And Tennessee has been on the leading edge of some of the state regulation between our Elvis Act, which is ensuring likeness, voice, image, and security, as well as legislation around preventing deep fakes. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. Good to have you. Finally, Representative Dan Knodel.
Good afternoon, State Rep Dan Knodel, Wisconsin, and just served a stint in the state Senate as well. And I'm here really from a states' rights perspective. And here in Wisconsin, and I believe around the country, state legislators are willing to take on these responsibilities. Where past a lot of legislatures might have been happy to cede over authority to either their executive branch or even the feds. And we just shouldn't be doing that. And we want to exercise the authority that we have on the state level.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Representative Fiafia, let me start with you. You're no stranger to technology and one of the leading tech companies in the world for a long time. I don't think anyone would characterize you as like a Luddite or anti-progress innovation. If you had to pick one area that you're focused on that you really think that your state can make an impact on, what are you most worried that if you were frozen out of that policy space, that this bill would have the impact?
Yeah, great question. Utah has taken a very thoughtful and proactive approach to AI policy. We've established an AI regulatory sandbox. This allows innovators to test emerging technologies while we study real world impacts. We also created a dedicated Office of AI Policy. This helps guide our long term approach and ensure we stay ahead of risks and opportunities. And so, this federal moratorium would freeze this kind of forward thinking work. It would prevent Utah and other states from responding to new developments, refining guardrails, and learning through hands on policy innovation. I come from the tech sector, and what's even generally available to the public is still months and sometimes even years behind. And so the fact that we have this 10-year moratorium, that's a lifetime in technology, and would really hurt not only states and states' rights to act, but at the end of the day, I think would hurt consumers. And for the state of Utah, that's a non-starter for us.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point because we often talk about regulation as just zero or one. It's either stopping a thing or stop, but actually policy can be the midwife for innovation and attracting capital. And I think I would assume all of you are seeking to do things that would enhance your state's economic position. It can actually be the thing that enables innovation. I want to stay with that, Senator Baldry. You talked about a fast-growing, emerging tech sector. I mean, do you think that your work and that of your colleagues has contributed to that? That actually state policymaking has played a demonstrative role in attracting those companies and allowing them to expand?
Absolutely. The regulatory sandbox that my colleague, Representative Fiafia, mentioned was the first of its kind in the nation. Since then, I think a few other states have gotten on board with this, experimental option. But that's why eliminating the federal AI moratorium in the Big Beautiful Bill is essential, because this one size fits all pause from Washington stifles progress and it sidelines local expertise. It undermines the spirit of cooperative governance. And we need to empower the states to responsibly explore and implement AI solution to honor this principle of federalism that we spoke about in the beginning, so that America and the states can lead and not lag in the AI era.
Senator Blessing, you mentioned a couple of the specific proposals that you've been quarterbacking. I wanted to give you a chance to dig in a little deeper and explain those and what could be at risk if that was taken off the table.
Yeah, I mean, so, I'm trying to, it's really tough sometimes to, explain to my colleagues like why I introduced Senate Bill 79, for example, which deals with AI price fixing. But I'm sure you've seen in the news, RealPage and its impact on housing, particularly the rental market. And it's effectively pushed the cost of rental housing higher than it otherwise would be in a competitive market. Moreover, I don't think it's just rental housing that this is a potential problem for. I've made the point, and I've heard this from another folk or several other people working in the industry, that this could also be the case for wages as well. That wages could be kept lower than they otherwise would be in a competitive market. And see, this is the problem with this, and I think Rep. Knodel really touched on it, that it really is a 10th Amendment issue. We can't experiment with these sorts of things at the state level. Yes, the vast majority of these will not pass, but I have not a lot of confidence that Congress is going to act on something like this. So it's basically just 10 years that we're just supposed to do nothing, I guess, in that space. But I would hope that this moratorium would fall off, if not for any other reason. But, look, we would like to protect Congress. I don't think they want to be in a situation where, hey, you break it, you fix it. There's going to be 10 years of significant pressure on them to deal with these issues, whether they like it or not. In the meantime, the states could be dealing with this. So, really, we are, sort of in the early innings on this. And, there's a lot of issues around this that I think folks are not seeing on the horizon. And I think they're going to wind up thinking it's a mistake in the long run.
So I want to note we definitely welcome questions from the audience. We got a couple. I'll throw those. I'll make sure that I distribute those around. Before I do, one last one that I had, Representative Guffey, as I understand it, child safety. I mean, that's what you work on in your quote day job, but this has also been a key issue for you. I made a reference to social media. I think we're at a point where nobody disagrees that, and I'm a free market guy. I have been my whole life and worked in pro free market institutions but children are afforded special protections. We have an obligation to understand that adults are given more bandwidth to experiment and adopt new technologies, but we should uh, be able to put some constraints and understanding that parents can understand the risk to their children. And in social media, we're in the position of having to retrofit potentially, a framework on looking back and saying, oh, we probably should have done that. What does this mean as AI is starting to be ubiquitous, but not totally? We're still at the kind of early stages. What does this mean in terms of child safety, child protections in an emerging tech?
Yeah, I mean, I lost my teenage son due to a social media crime called sextortion. So this has become my mission in life. I travel around, being chair of the AI subcommittee in South Carolina. I have not even held a meeting because I believe that we have to be reactive. But let's be honest, whenever it comes up to a congressional level, they've had 29 years to protect children online, and we see it's not a priority. I firmly believe that with the emergence of AI, and whenever I came in and passed Gavin's Law in remembrance of my son, the first person charged was charged for utilizing AI to commit sextortion. That was something that wasn't even thought of at the time whenever we started writing the bill in 2023, but because of the language, they were able to charge under that. But you're talking about taking away states' rights for 10 years. That is, as I would say, for lawmakers, we're all used to someone putting a poison pill in a bill. The difference is instead of killing the bill, we're actually going to kill children if we push something through like this because we don't know what's coming around the corner.
I think that's really well put, and I think it is so important that it actually emphasizes how salient this is. This is not an abstract conversation. I mean, these are and state legislatures are closest to constituents every day. Many of whom are obviously part-time legislators. So it's not that it's a full-time professional calling that takes you outside of it. I wanted to flag that Representative Shannon Zimmerman joined us, and folks will be coming in and out. Obviously, many are in the middle of their own busy legislative sessions. So we wanted to start with that. I wanted to throw this out. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk. So as it's currently positioned in the bill, it is not strictly a federal prohibition. It is a conditioning of funds on states either doing or not doing something. I'll throw this out to anybody. Has anybody considered that? Is this a reasonable trade-off? Is this something that your state or talking to your executive or that you've discussed or considered and said, well, maybe we have to forego funding, or maybe that's just not doable and neither is workable? And anybody,
Yeah.
feel free. I just Senator Barry Usher had his hand raised. I don't know if you want to jump on that. And you're on mute.
Absolutely. Thank you. I believe that tying this to the BEAD funding runs counter to what Montana's AI expansion efforts have been and will be. Without reliable broadband, which that's what the BEAD money is, it benefits and takes AI out of reach for many Montanans. As you all know, Montana is a very, very, very large state, and that BEAD money we're trying to get just internet access to everybody. But without that funding, we're not going to be able to accomplish that goal. And so I believe tying that money is just the wrong way for the feds to control what the states can and cannot do. which brings it back to what Representative Nodal said about the 10th Amendment and overreach by Congress.
Yeah, and I know we had a bunch of questions basically on the same topic. Is this a workable trade-off? Is this reasonable? Does anyone else want to jump in on that?
I'll take that. So respectfully, I don't know how much Ohio gets off the top of my head in broadband funding. But I see this all the time at the state level where, you have local governments, political subdivisions that do something, and rather than, banning that, preempting them, we'll tie it to, at least in Ohio, local government funds or something like that. And universally, they all just fall off and decide to forego doing it because they can't take the financial hit. And I would hope those in Congress, and frankly, I would be willing to wager the vast majority of them have served at the state level in some capacity, whether it's in the executive branch or the legislature, that they probably didn't appreciate it when they were in the state at the state level watching Congress do something similar in some other area. Now that they're in Congress, I would hope that they wouldn't, just change their mind on this and decide that they're going to put a poison pill in here, because that's what this is. I mean, if the sum of money is large enough, the states just cannot do it, and it'll be enough to basically kill it. So I would respectfully view this as absolutely a prohibition.
Representative Zimmerman, and just briefly introduce yourself and your position.
Yeah. First, I apologize. Yes, we're juggling
No
a lot of
problem.
things here today. So, Representative Zimmerman from Wisconsin. I have spent my entire career in tech, and I currently lead a large AI organization in my day job. So, I'm intimately familiar with this subject. From what I've heard thus far, and I'll just quickly throw my 2 cents in. Absolutely, the worst thing the federal government can do right now is to try and put restrictions in any way, shape, or form. There's a variety of reasons for that. I think that it's overreach. I also think that if we, if data privacy, take the simple topic of data privacy for a moment, right? States are picking that legislation up because the federal government can't even agree on a simple thing like that. So my confidence in their ability to actually execute and perform is very low, and especially in an area that is going to transform the world in good ways, and we'll adapt and adjust if we see otherwise. But from one guy's vantage point that's in the biz, I would say that this should not be adopted.
Senator Watson.
Yeah, I was just gonna on the federal funding side of it. It's really an admission by the Congress that they really don't have authority to do this. And so what they do, like they've done in other spaces, is they attach some type of funding requirement to the state adopting certain legislations or rules and regulations, because they realize, particularly under the 10th Amendment, really just strictly under the Constitution, they don't have the authority to do it. So what they force states to do is make a decision. Do we want money or do we want to regulate ourselves? And that's a challenge that states will have to ask themselves if this remains in the bill.
Yeah, Senator Watson, I just want to stay with you for a second. And I would know, I mean, this is not that unusual, for better or for worse. The drinking age effectively being 21 across the country is because of Department of Transportation funds originally conditioning. The Department of Education and the organic statute doesn't really have a lot of regulatory authority, but having access to federal education funds is tied to a lot of those policies. So for better or for worse, whether you think this is a good idea or not, this is not an unusual mechanism to tie to funding. But I know we've got a lot of questions about, are states going to have to think very deeply about, is this a worthwhile trade-off in this particular case? But Senator Watson, I wanted to flag, and you'd mentioned the Elvis Act. This is something that has gotten a lot of attention across the country, but especially in Washington. I believe Senator Blackburn has been very supportive of efforts in this similar direction. I just wanted to give you a chance to expound on that, on what it means for your state and why you've been a champion of that.
Well, I mean, of course, Elvis Elvis is from, well, he's from Mississippi, but he spent most of his life in West Tennessee and Memphis. It's an acronym for ensuring likeness, voice, image security. Tennessee has a large entertainment industry, particularly music industry, country music in particular, but we have also the blues out in West Tennessee. And over the past several years, as technology, particularly AI technology, has advanced, it has started to infringe upon the artists' performances and their proprietary information or their proprietary performance information. And so the state of Tennessee, and working with Senator Blackburn, actually, the state of Tennessee got out in front of that around AI and started putting some regulations and laws to protect the property that these artists have created. And I'm sure that's true in the film space and many other spaces as well. So I think it's really important that states defend their right to regulate this industry, because it has particular impact at the local level.
And I mean, this is, as you know, hugely important, but also a really complicated issue. IP has always been an area that has not lent itself easily to simple answers. But I think that's kind of the point, that in the absence of a clear standard from Congress on some of these questions, they're going to have to get resolved one way or another. And things like likeness.
Yeah, well, and as some of my colleagues have pointed out, by the time our congressional folks have addressed it, and listen, quite frankly, for an administration that has really been focused on returning authority back to the states, this is one aspect of this piece of legislation that I'm quite disappointed in. But as some of my colleagues have pointed out, by the time Congress, because technology moves at such a fast speed, by the time Congress has had an opportunity to address a problem or address a situation, it's moved on, and the states are left to wrestle with it, or the individual citizen is left to wrestle with it. So that's why it's critically important that this part of the bill be removed, and that this responsibility remain working cooperatively with our friends at the federal level, but this responsibility remain at the state level.
So the way that um, and sorry, I'm reading the audience questions. So again, the actual proposal has been modified over time. Obviously, this is a bill that is still very much live, has not been voted on in the Senate. If the Senate does take up a modified version, I'll have to go back to the House or maybe so let's just say that this is the actual language is still in flux. But I think the current version, most latest version, would have some language around, as long as states don't do anything, as long as they do anything that remove legal impediments to adoption, their funding would not be threatened, and that would not be subject to it. We had a question about why is that a problem, and I think it was in reference to what Utah is doing with the regulatory sandbox and kind of encouraging, and why would that be disallowed under this? I don't know if you guys have thoughts. I just want to add, I think this is an important point. We don't know how to define what constitutes removing a legal impediment or an innovation impediment or not. That is not a binary categorical distinction. It could be subject to litigation enforcement by FTC, but I think it just gets back to the same problem as now are you actually increasing regulatory and legal certainty for companies, or are you actually decreasing it? Because now we've added a secondary layer of questioning of where the policymaking is coming from. But Senator Blessing.
Yes. So I see this again at the state level, where there's so many of these proposals that, for those in the industry, they'll say, well, what is wrong with this? And then you find out, the more that you look into it, that it's very, it's too clever by half, that really their end goal is to just block any and all regulation, which I think is what they're trying to do, and then say, well, that's really not what we're trying to do. You can do this, this, and this, but this, and this are really impractical for state legislatures to work with. And I did see another question with respect to regulatory capture, and I frankly feel like that dovetails with this in the sense that, I carry legislation on, right to repair and some of these other antitrust issues. And you wouldn't believe that the amount of pushback that we get if there is a cause of action in there. What they always want to do is vest the power in the AG and the AG alone, which sounds great to the layman. The problem is it creates a bottleneck whereby a lot of these AGs, if not all of them, in the 50 states, run for reelection, run for election. They require campaign donations, many of which are going to come from tech. And then all they have to do in office is nothing. So basically, you have no enforcement. And that's where, the regulatory capture piece of this comes in. And frankly, I think it goes hand in hand with too clever by half legislation.
Let me do this, Representative Guffey, and I want to make sure I give Representative Knodel looped in here. But I would also know you mentioned the AG, not for nothing, but something like 40 current state AGs, including many Republican AGs, have also expressed concern about this provision, right? But in the bill, but the moratorium. So there is some pretty widespread concern with the federal government on such a fast-moving live issue, kind of clearing the deck without a real plan to replace it and say, we're drawing up the play of how we're going to have a national standard on some of these issues. But Representative Guffey.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't understand the ramifications of Section 230 until I lost my son. And I started looking at it, and, that was 1996. Think of how much tech has changed since we implemented that. I often joke and say it took me an hour to download a Wu-Tang Clan song in 1996. But we're talking about artificial intelligence, which is moving so fast. 230 already strips our civil pursuit of holding companies responsible. But now you're trying to tell the states that are closest to the people that we can't legislate issues to protect our citizens. That is the biggest problem to me. I'm a firm believer in government works best closest to the people. And we're the ones that people are seeing in and out every single day. And as we're trying to, I don't even want to say regulate, because I don't want to regulate. I want the tech companies to regulate themselves. But we see that we don't have a lot of good actors. And we're seeing kids die consistently with chatbots telling them to kill themselves. The CSAM that's on the rise. And we've got to be able to regulate that. And I had very long conversations with members of Congress over the past few days in regards to this, and them trying to say this is to keep from stifling innovation. And I understand that, but this is the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah. Well, as Method Man said, cash rules everything around me. Representative Knodel, I want to tee up this question. Feel free to go on a different topic, but I'm really curious about any interactions you've had with your congressional delegation, with other leaders that have an direct lines to Congress. Have you had any of those conversations? And if you had, what's been the response?
Of course, the letter that a number of us signed, and we'll follow up this conversation with a further contact with our U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, who at this point is one of the few that is holding up the big, beautiful bill and has some specific concerns. So we will follow up with that and make sure that this is at the top of that list of things to be addressed or removed from the bill before we go back to the House. And then I think we've got to show our federal representatives that we are taking action. It's been mentioned on sextortion. We just did a bill in our state assembly this past week on that specifically. And Rep. Zimmerman is on with us. So he's been leading on all these issues. So we need to show that to our federal representatives that we are taking action. We're not sitting and waiting for them, nor do we want to. And we can react and we can adjust much more quickly than Congress can in addressing these issues. So, and you have to be willing to lose the addiction to federal funding. All addictions are difficult to break, but you've got to factor that into your planning that let's do this on our own at the state level, and Fed funding or not, we need to take action.
Let me just tag that quickly. So maybe less so about Congress, but just your colleagues in the legislature, maybe some who haven't been laser focused on this issue or tech or impact. What's been the response? Are people starting to perk up their ears and become a little more animated?
Absolutely, and I'd like to defer to Rep. Zimmerman on that specifically. He has led, if he's with us yet.
I think Zimmerman had to jump off.
He did. Okay. He's also on the finance committee, so we have a budget to do in the next couple of days. But we are taking action. Bills are being drafted, and we need to follow through with our federal representatives.
Senator Baldry.
So frankly, I'm baffled how this even made it into the big beautiful bill, because at least for the state of Utah, just for example, two of the bills that we passed this session in the Senate, Senate Bill 271, Senate Bill 226, they had unanimous votes from committee through. All the floor votes were unanimous the entire way through. And so in the state of Utah, this is a nonpartisan issue. And while Utah may be at 100% in unanimity, if we look at the rest of the country, as you mentioned, we had the 40 attorneys general who have said we are opposed. 40 out of 50, that's pretty huge. So it's not just unique to Utah. And then, of course, we have the new polling from the Institute for Family Studies out this week that shows that American voters oppose the AI law moratorium by a 3-to-1 margin. So this is not a partisan issue, and I am expecting and hoping strongly that Washington takes note, because American people are behind us.
I think back to and my Wisconsin colleagues may remember this. One of the last bills I worked on when I was in Congress was a bill that actually had its origination in the states, and I think something like 47 states had passed by 99% approval this thing called right to try. But it was the states that led that effort, and it didn't impede the federal effort. It actually informed it. And then a federal law was passed, and actually the first Trump administration, then President Trump, signed that bill. I don't think that we should get out of the framework of thinking of the state legislatures working in opposition to Congress. I really think these efforts can feed, and especially when they pass overwhelmingly in many cases at the state level, because people are closer to it, and there's maybe less noise as much relative to DC. Those things can feed in and work in concert, and the best ideas then bubble up, and our states are really competing to say we have the best policy mix, and Congress, you should adopt more of the things that we're doing. And by the way, people understand things like CSAM, and they're starting to understand things like sextortion, and they're demanding some kind of solution if it's not going to be self-provided through normal market incentives. I'm sorry, apologies. I don't know if anyone wants to take this. I'll throw this out. I think there's an argument that actually adoption and innovation can be accelerated when the rules of the road are clear. And for something that is moving fast and adapting in ways we can't anticipate, it can be hard to sort of draw those lines. But in my work, and back when I was an economist and a faculty member, a lot of my work was showing that having clear rules of the road actually incentivized investment and gave companies in the private sector, and more to the point, the providers of capital, the confidence to say, we're going to pour money into these areas because we know where the market's going to lead. We know, and also downstream users, non-tech experts, just kind of lay users can feel more confident that the product that they're using, the kinds of websites, the kind of services they're engaging in, they just always assume there must be some protection. It must have been worked out in the background. But as they learn that there aren't, that we don't have protections for children, that we don't have expectations of online privacy or digital likenesses, or ownership of my identity, then they become very hesitant, and that can actually harm it. I
Yeah.
feel free to expound on that or not, Guffey,
Yeah.
Senator
So
Usher, Baldry.
I use this as an example. Whenever I was elected to the state house in 2023, South Carolina has been behind on the tech laws. And whenever I came in, once we got Gavin's law passed, you've seen this windfall of, bipartisan legislation to address issues that come up. And look, I want South Carolina to lead in the AI revolution. I'm sure everyone else on this call wants their states to lead. And the way that I was addressing that is by not over-regulating. And I think the only way, and I've made it very publicly known that if this passes, my first plan is to pass regulations on AI just to challenge it in court. It drives me crazy, but I agree with you. I mean, just having a clear basic guideline without over-regulating. Everyone, it sounds great to say, let's be proactive and write all this. But, we need to learn to be reactive whenever we're not trying to stifle innovation. I think proactive laws are why we have so many bad laws on the books.
Senator Usher.
Yeah, so I mean, just to add on to that, and actually, um, Rep Guffey said earlier, I believe also government is best closest to the people. But with that said, I mean, if this had been written with the federal government and they came out with sideboards, whether we agreed with the sideboards or not, I don't think this would be as much of an issue because really the way it's written, it is, and again, the same way Rep Guppy said is, it's written in a manner that just opens it up for legal lawsuits. And do we really want to tie everybody, the government, federal government, state governments? We've got 40 AGs that have weighed in against this already. It just opens it up. And we know that state governments are able to put in laws a lot quicker and a lot more meaningful than the federal government. Congress does not move very quickly at all. And again, just to cut a knife and just say, nope, you can't do anything. You can't put any sideboards. You cannot allow this and not allow that. They didn't say anything. They just said it's a moratorium for 10 years for the states to do anything. And I think that's bad. It opens it up as, like I said, for lawsuits. I think that we in Montana have passed a couple of bills already that, really stifle malicious purposes, privacy, mass surveillance, and discriminating against Montanans. But those are good laws. And if Congress would, like you said, take the lead from the states and collectively look at what we've already done at the state level in all the states and come out with something that is meaningful, I don't think we would, as states, be as um, objective or opposed to this. Congress takes too long. In 10 years, I mean, 10 weeks, we could have a different AI than we have today. I mean, AI is moving so quickly. What's the rumor is you buy a laptop and by the time you get it home, it's outdated. It's just we need sideboards, and the people that are investing in this technology need to know what the rules of the road are. And I think they're just stifling it by saying, nope, moratorium for 10 years. That's bad policy from the federal government.
Yeah, and I mean, and we know this, states can move and pivot and adapt faster than Congress. That's largely by design. That's neither good or bad, but it is one of the virtues of more localized policy action happening in that arena. And then again, it bubbles up into something that's hopefully a little more robust and semi-permanent. We don't want Congress to act every day reacted to a new thing. But Representative Guffey and a few of you mentioned, online privacy. This is not a new issue. This is not something that happened yesterday and now they're responding This is something that basically large majorities of the American public have been very clear that, okay, we understand there's some risks, but we should have some rules of the road that govern who owns data, obligations to children, et cetera. And Congress has thus far just has not acted. Senator Baldry, I know your hand up, but let me throw potentially another question to you. Those companies you mentioned, a long list, and I'm sure it's not exhaustive, that are in your district, that are in your area, do they see operating? Well, I think your argument would be you guys have created a regulatory environment, a policy environment that's attractive for investment, for growth. But those conversations, the practical effect of, yeah, there are 50 states and each one is entitled to set their policy parameters. Is it that particularly onerous for them, for software companies, or do they find a way to operate? They'll locate in the best place, but they still want to be national companies. They still want to sell to customers across the country. How do they just describe that?
Well, companies are locating in Utah, and there's a reason for that. It's no accident that Utah's been ranked the #1 state for economic outlook 18 years in a row. And why? Well, I'd submit to you that here in Utah, we don't wait for permission to build the future. A federal AI moratorium might play in DC, but out west, we believe in innovation, not hesitation. And the 10th Amendment wasn't written to keep us stuck, it was written to keep us free. There's an analogy, it says the AI is developing like a dam that's about to burst. A moratorium isn't a reinforcement, it's like turning your back on the water and hoping that it holds. And so in Utah, we have this place of innovation. And in fact, right, we know that the federal government derives its power from the states, that those powers are enumerated in the 10th Amendment. And I believe our founders created the states as learning laboratories for the nation. And when the federal government intervenes or interferes, it's a constitutional issue. It's not simply a nuisance because it's a matter of constitutional integrity. And the federal government has no enumerated power to dictate how the states explore or implement emerging technologies. Our states have to remain free to lead, innovate, and govern in ways that are unique and that reflect the values of the people in those states. And that's the promise of federalism. It's the pathway to responsible, forward-looking AI policy.
As we start to wrap up here, I think that's a really important point, Senator Baldry. I want to give everyone an opportunity in their closing remarks. I'm asking you, what is your one big emphasis point to Congress? I mean, right now, Congress is in the driver's seat in the decision-making position. What is the one thing that you want to communicate to, let's say, Congress at large, or your congressional delegation, that you just want to emphasize, like, this is the impact of this. This has real impacts on my state and my district, and I'll give everyone an opportunity, and I'll go around. Let me start with Senator Barry Usher, if you don't mind.
Sure. I thought maybe you'd go in the same order, so I was preparing. I think the biggest issue we have is, one, we are very proactive in the technology sphere, and we in Montana and all states really want to see cyborgs, and the federal government just does not have it. So we believe that this is a overreach by Congress and it violates the 10th Amendment. And the way this moratorium is written, it opens it up. It's a legal minefield. It's vague, invites lawsuits, and leaves states guessing about what they can and can't do. And lastly, tying the BEAD funding for us, being such a large geographical state, we're just trying to get internet to everybody. And if they've tied it to BEAD, and we would hate to see it stifle just getting regular technology to people.
And for my part, I would add, I think even the best good faith reading of the provision that was most recently drafted, I, it would still be unworkable. I think you can make an argument there's a commendable intent there, but as was discussed by some of my colleagues, it, it it's it's not workable as written because what is an impediment or isn't to adoption is just not well defined. I think would actually end up creating more uncertainty. Senator Blessing.
Yep. Thank you for that. No, I would simply say this. This tech revolution that we've had for the past 20, 30 years, culminating right now in AI, I feel like mirrors other revolutions that we've had, most notably the Industrial Revolution during the Gilded Age, and how lack of regulation and corruption led to the Progressive Era. And I think Congress needs to keep in mind that they really should just let this go. Let the states be the laboratories of democracy that Senator Baldery mentioned. And by the way, she keeps good company. I believe it was Louis Brandeis who mentioned that over 100 years ago. And if they do this, if they want to be the sole regulators of AI, you know, this isn't like, tobacco policy or something like that. This is going to be, a multi-year, decades-long battle, and I think they're going to regret trying to take on all the heat.
Yeah, and you mentioned heat. Just to talk my book, as they say. Recently, I testified for Congress on the impact of the Chevron decision. This is about the regulatory authority, and I made a point, with that being too cute, that there's a sort of a first law of thermodynamics in policy. If one branch or one entity within our policy making structure in America doesn't do its job of supplying that demand will go somewhere else. That policy making energy will go somewhere else. So in the absence of Congress doing the thing that it says that it wants to do, um, it's not people aren't going to stop, and state legislators are not going to stop. That's just going to go elsewhere. It's going to go to AGs, as was referenced, to state legislators, to governors, to executives, to all kinds of to courts, et cetera. So you can't actually put a moratorium on policymaking. It will happen one way or another. Senator Bo Watson, if you had any concluding thoughts.
Yeah, well, look, I think probably most of the members of Congress weren't really aware that this was really in the bill, given the totality and the length and volume of the bill. So I'm not giving them a pass, but I'm giving them a little bit of a break. I do hope my message to our congressional delegation, and of course, Senator Blackburn is spearheading our approach of trying to amend the bill, amend this out, is that they continue down the path of federalism that this administration and this Congress has been walking. They've been, whether one agrees or disagrees, they have been pushing authority back at the states. Sometimes because policy-wise, it's the right thing to do. And a more important reason, perhaps, to Congress at this point in time is their ability to afford some of the things that they have heretofore been doing. So my message to Congress would be to remove this and continue down the path of federalism. States have demonstrated an ability to appropriately regulate this industry. We've also demonstrated an ability to work cooperatively, as you referenced earlier. We've been able to work cooperatively with our federal partners. And where good ideas have emerged from the states, allow the federal government then to absorb those good ideas and make that part of their policymaking decision rather than them trying to go it alone. So let's stick with federalism. It's worked for 250 years. Our 249th birthday is coming up. So let's get to 250 without getting into restricting states' abilities to function correctly.
Happy semi-sesquicentennial to
Yeah,
all who celebrate.
Yeah. Well, if you can pronounce that without using AI, you're doing pretty good.
Representative Knodel.
Very good. I think echoing what has been said. I think our representatives of Congress, as was mentioned earlier, many have been state legislators, and it will resonate with them that they shouldn't put handcuffs on the laboratories that the states we can do a lot of the heavy lifting for them. by doing the drafting and enacting the legislation. So I think it's an effort where we can cooperate with Congress, and our concerns should resonate. And then don't preempt what we've already done on the state level. A number of states we've heard from have enacted AI legislation. So let's not freeze that out or preempt that. We're doing the work, we're getting it done, and we should be able to partner with our federal delegation in that way.
And I want to end with Representative Guffey, not the least of which, because this is a personal issue, which isn't a necessary condition to smart policy making. It shouldn't have to be, but this was part of the discussion around when we were talking about the Take It Down Act, and we had real victims come speak to Congress and speak to maybe some folks who would have been skeptical, but then they saw that this was not an abstract issue. We can have innovation, we can have incredible leaps and capabilities, but we are allowed to say, hey, these are risks that we know, these are harms, let's govern those, let's create rules, and companies will innovate around them. They'll figure out ways to include those protections and still do the thing that that they want to do, or the product that they're trying to do. So your message to Congress, Representative Guffey.
I think just looking as a civil servant, our job is to protect our citizens in the freest way possible, to not impede. And and I understand many of the congressional members, as Senator Watson said, they might not have fully understood. I'm not saying they didn't read it, but I'm thinking they don't fully understand the ramifications. However, now we've got an army standing up and saying, look, this is wrong. These are the possible ramifications. And my question to Congress would be, would you make a blind decision that's going to lock your family into not being able to make that change for 10 years? And I feel like that is what they are doing. They are putting the citizens at risk. I think this will be the biggest mistake since Section 230 whenever it comes to protecting children online. And they're going to be left with it, and children will die just simply because we can't react in order to force tech companies to put children first. And I know there's many issues, but that is the primary thing. And if you've met any of the family members that have lost children to some of the big tech issues, you can't tell me, just a year ago was the first time we heard about a chatbot encouraging a 14-year-old to take his life. You can't tell me that if that happened to you, and then your Congress said you can't make a law to address that, that would not tick you off. And you don't believe that that's government overreach. Because whenever you have Republicans and Democrats alike saying this is government overreach, maybe you should listen.
And Senator Baldry, I apologize. You did such a great job in the last response, but just quickly to close the thought.
Yes. So the one thing we didn't talk about that I was hoping was we talked about the local impact, but not the global competitive perspective. So pausing AI development in one country while others race ahead is like stepping off the track in the middle of a global relay, and the baton keeps moving, but it's not in our hands. And Utah is not hitting pause while the world hits play. The 10th Amendment protects our right to lead, not to lag. And I'll end there.
I really appreciate all you guys. I know it's a busy time, as it always is, but particularly right now. I'm sure all of you will get follow-up responses from local press and folks we'll forward them. And for folks listening and folks from press who have questions, please reach out to our press team at ARI. This is still an open question. We'll see where it lands, and we're still active. And we encourage folks who agree with the folks in this press conference to also get engaged, because Congress will listen at some point when there's enough of enough noise being made about it. And I think that's starting to happen. So I appreciate everyone joining us. I appreciate all of you for joining us, and the colleagues who had to jump on and jump off. And we'll stay connected and stay tuned.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.